I guess we're live. So hey everybody, it's kidRiot here with Pwnyboy again. Say if you want to say something, Pony.
Hello.
Hello. And actually, last week I'm not sure if you guys watched it, but Pony and I were talking about kind of in a loose form of what we're going to be doing with the show. And I think that every week we're going to be doing something different. There's going to be a new theme, and it's all based on basically two main ideas, and that's solo play and team play, and kind of everything in between. And also there'll be some things. It depends on what goes on with the community, if there's events happening, and we'll talk about that. But for this week, the theme of this show is mentality. Hey, what's up, man? I obviously can't change the stream title. Only mods can do that. But it's kind of funny that it's "Take Me Please." I think it's somewhat fitting. But anyway, well, on with the show. The thing that we're going to be talking about, like I said, is mentality. And when you really think about what mentality means, it applies to everything basically we do, right? Like there's stuff like in sports that mentality is a huge thing. I mean, in academic, when you do academic stuff, mentality is basically everything. It's how you structure, how logical you are. Even the military, we used to use it a lot. But we're talking about Planetside 2. So what does mentality mean to Planetside 2? And when you talk about the solo play, right? When you're out there, like what I'm doing right now, I'm basically flying solo. There isn't anybody around me. I'm in an outfit, but I'm just solo. There's a couple things that affect you. Really, your state of mind. How you react to certain things, how things play out, whether it's good or bad, or it is really, really huge, because it really basically determines how you actually enjoy the game and what you take out of the game. When you talk about team mentality, it's everything from like how cohesive you are, how effective you are at communicating, things like that. But when it comes down to it, it's basically how each individual affects the team. And I mean, this can be, I'm sure you guys have been in squads before, outfits where you'll have like that one guy who logs on, and he has no idea what's going on, so he starts asking questions like, hey, where are we at, what's going on? As something simple as just going into a channel and listening before you speak is huge. And that's all basically where this person's coming from. And then you also talk about how to keep your team focused. And a lot of it comes out to, because sometimes things don't work out the way we plan them. Like your platoon leader says, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to do this. And sometimes it just doesn't happen the way you want. And what you do after that, how affected your morale it is, how you're able to bounce back, how quick you're able to bounce back and say, let's move on to the next objective, really determines a lot. And this isn't about necessarily being competitive, being better than anybody else. When we talk about mentality, what Pony and I are going to be talking about is how it affects your self-improvement and what you're willing to do to improve. And in a game like Planetside 2, where you could basically do whatever you want, there's a lot of different ways you could do that. But we're basically going to narrow it down and see what's going on. Do you have anything to add to that, Pony?
Yeah, I would say that no matter what you're doing, having a good mentality will be positive for you. So, like, if you're concerned with self-improvement, like you're like, I want to get better, it's really, really hard to get better at anything without the right frame of mind about it. And no matter what, if you have a good frame of mind about what you're doing, if you have a good mentality, it's less stressful to play the game, and it is more fun, and with the right frame of mind. So you're going to be having more fun, you're going to be learning more, you're going to be improving better, and just everything about your play experience is going to be positive. I'm getting echo off you, kid.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's you have to mute the stream, that's why.
No, the stream is muted.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, anyways. It's like I said, more fun, less stressful, and it'll allow you to improve, and that's very important.
Yeah, and I mean, especially too, there's all kinds of things that can happen to affect your mentality while you play, right? Like like what just happened when you die. Like, do you rage or what do you do? But I actually I want to get into this too before we get too off. Is I don't know. I've played a lot of sports, and when you play sports, when you actively compete, mentality is huge. I mean, athletes and even coaches like to say that sports is mostly a mental game, and a lot of it that happens, the mental aspect of it happens mostly, in preparation between matches. It's like what we're gonna do. What's the game plan for the next game, or what did we do wrong last game? How are we gonna improve? In football, you watch tapes. In other sports, you basically practice different things, and it's all from fundamentals to really fancy plays. It all depends. But when you're actually in a competition in sports, you have no time to think. It's all instinct. I mean, and that instinct is developed on during the planning stages. It's like martial arts, right? Like you practice certain movements in martial arts, defensive or offensive, to the point where when somebody throws a punch at you, you don't think. And when you talk about Planetside 2, when you really when you look peeking a corner and you're going to shoot somebody, or even like right now when I got into that ESF dogfight, you're reacting automatically, and that's based really on what the level of skill you have. What are your good habits? What are your bad habits? And so mentality plays a huge role in what we do. And it's not. I mean, we're talking about Planetside 2, but it really affects a lot of things. But the thing that differs in Planetside 2 from sports, and this is actually really important. I mean, aside from the fact that you're not sweating, you're not pushing or pulling or running into people, is the fact that when you die in Planetside 2, you have a chance to actually sit back and ask yourself the question, what happened? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? You basically have a chance to become introspective, take a breath, sit back, and either relax or get that intensity going, and basically push yourself to the next level. Whereas in sports, like I said, most of that stuff kind of happens instinctively, or in between matches. So when you ask yourself the question, like, why is that important? When you die, and say I died, and say, what happened? What did I do? Well, I think, okay, well, I overextended, or maybe I was in the wrong position. Maybe I got too greedy. And so it's not enough to answer the question. You have to ask yourself the next question is, well, how do I make sure that doesn't happen again? And in asking yourself these questions and in finding the answers, it can really improve not just your play style, but like Pwny said, like your frame of mind. How much enjoyment you're getting from the game. And so we're going to be looking at stuff like that. Do you want to add anything to that, Pwny?
Not too terribly much, though. Grail says something that is technically inaccurate. He says good players and competitors never panic. That is not necessarily true, but anytime it does happen, it is a mistake.
Yeah.
So saying it never happens is saying that competitive players never make mistakes, and that's not true in any game. But it's something you want to avoid.
Right, and even more than that, I would go deeper and say that sometimes even top competitors lose confidence. Right, like say they're doing well, take Kobe Bryant, he's doing well, but the Lakers are losing, and so his confidence level might actually drop. So his personal performance might be affected. So it might not even be necessarily that he panics, but he's not playing to his full potential because of the morale of the team. And so that's why I say, like, when we talk about solo play and team play and the mentality, they kind of intertwine. They go back and forth really, really easily. And so sometimes it's easy, no matter how good you're doing, to get frustrated maybe with your teammates or what's going on or the decisions from leadership. So we're going to go over why those things happen, how you can improve them, and basically how you can avoid some of the common pitfalls. And I mean, nobody's perfect, right? Like, I get into habits where, and we'll talk about this, how I get killed by somebody and I want to go after that person and get him back. But really how that narrows your frame of reference, right? You're not playing as well, or you're not being as aware as you should be.
Okay, so we should probably move on to the first topic, which is specifically solo and general mentality, as opposed to what affects people as a team.
Right.
That is, how do I improve as an individual? How does mentality affect me as an individual?
Okay,
now, that doesn't mean that I'm Joey McSolo and I just always solo, so this applies to me, and if you play on a team, it doesn't apply to you.
Right.
Solo mentality always applies to you. It works within the context of team mentality as well when you're playing with other people.
All right, so go ahead and start us off. I'm gonna try and find a decent fight here, because it's hard. I still haven't mastered the art of playing and talking at the same time. So go ahead and lead us off, man.
Okay, so like I said, with solo mentality, we already went over this. It's very hard to improve if you don't know how to improve, or if you don't know that you need to improve. And mentality is about putting yourself in that right frame of mind. I'm still getting a lot of echo off you, kid. You're just straight coughing.
Is it really? Oh yeah, because I'm here. Sorry,
on TeamSpeak, you're just like constantly broadcasting.
Yeah, here. Let me turn that off.
Okay, so I'm going to start this off with what I call discipline. That is, and this will form the context within which the rest of mentality is built around. And specifically, we're going to start with having goals. So you need to have a goal if you're sitting down and you're attempting to improve. There needs to be something you know that you need to improve upon. So if you're just like, I'm bad at the game, I suck, geez, I need to get better, and you're just like, I know, I'll play the game and then I'll get better, it won't necessarily magically follow that will be true. You will probably need to find and identify some problem with your play and then fix it. So you need to have a goal. You need to say, you know what, I want to get better at flying an ESF like kidRiot here. Because you watch kidRiot, he's pretty bad, and he needs to get better. So he's going to say, I want to get better at flying ESF. And once you have a goal, then you can really wrap your mind around what you're doing and what you're approaching. Because if it's just kind of general and ethereal and you don't have a goal, you're not going to get anywhere. After that, you need to structure your practice. So not only do you need to have a goal, you need to have some structure to how you're going about it. You have to say, you know what, I'm going to work on this particular thing. I'm going to spend 20 minutes every day just working on my ESF nose gunning against other ESFs, and I'm going to seek out that situation as much as I can, and I'm going to specifically focus on learning from it. That doesn't mean you won't run into other situations that you can learn from in the process, because maybe you won't be able to always find an ESF, and you can work on picking off infantry with it or this and that, and you can learn other things, but you'll learn the most. Who's the guy speaking? I'm Pwnyboy. I should have established those credentials at the beginning. Yeah, let me just intercede there so you guys know who the hell I am.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was NUC, former competitive team for Planetside 2. I was the Delta Squad leader for about a little over a year. Delta Squad was a mostly infantry squad, but we were pretty general. We handled a lot of things. Back to structured practice.
Actually, I want to go into what you were saying about goals.
I want to practice this for this amount of time, because if you just kind of generally do stuff in general, once again, it's unfocused, it's kind of all over the board, you're just kind of not really being efficient with your time. And lastly, towards discipline is repetition. You want to do things again and again and again and again, and you have to have the mental fortitude to do that. You have to check the ADHD at the door a little bit and say, okay, you know what, I'm actually going to sit down and I'm going to work on this. I'm going to, even if I'm not having the most fun with it, I'm going to put the time into it. And you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and each time you get a little better, you learn a little something, and then once you start doing it right, then you can take a break. Then you can say, you know what, I've learned something today. But, that's very important, this one. Any thoughts on that, kidRiot?
Yeah, actually, say, Shai, the gardeners got here, so I might actually interfere with the audio.
I can't hear kidRiot.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot how to push the transmit. I was going to say that, let's go back and let's say I'm a new player, right? And I have no experience, and I'm basically approaching Planetside 2 with no team. So I'm like the quintessential kind of like, average Joe, whatever. So you set goals, like how do you figure out what are the right goals? How do you even figure out what that looks like? Because you figure most people are going to come in and just do what everybody else is doing, right? Follow the crowd. So how do you kind of separate yourself from that and get basically to like the next level?
Okay, that kind of brings us to mistakes. So when you're doing this, once you've got your goals and your practice, you're going to be making mistakes all the time. Even there's literally nobody who plays this game today who plays this game perfectly. And that's true of almost any game, anytime, ever, anywhere. There is almost no such thing as a perfect game unless the game is very simple. You're presented with decisions every single moment you play this game. Exactly how far do I run forward? When do I turn? How do I engage these guys? Do I change where I'm spawning? Do I change fights? Do I pull a different vehicle? Do I use a different gun? All of these things are decisions you're presented with at all times. So identifying what exactly you're doing wrong at any given moment is probably the most complicated thing you're going to be doing. And this is a trap a lot of less experienced gamers fall into. They don't know how to identify when and exactly how they're making a mistake. We've all run into the hack user before, the guy who's like, every time he gets killed, he's like, friggin' hackers, this is all BS. And what he's doing is he's making mistakes, losing fights, and then not acknowledging those mistakes and not identifying what caused them. And as a result, he's never getting any better. It's no coincidence those players who tend to give the most accusations tend to be pretty bad players.
Yeah, and I mean he's taking basically
just a question of mentality, right?
He's basically just taking like no accountability for his actions. He's saying this wasn't my fault. It was something with the game or something that the other person did. And I think that's one of the worst things that you could do in anything. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of chaos. It's client side. Sometimes they say shit does hit the fan, but for the most part, most of it is basically it's what you did. It may not be that maybe you got outshot, but maybe you were in the wrong position. Maybe you were exposed. Maybe you got spotted. Maybe the guy you're playing against is communicating with other people, and they knew where you were at. There's a lot of different things that could happen to make it that somebody else beats you, either in a one-on-one fight or whatever it is. And I think once you start saying that it wasn't my fault, it was his fault, you automatically stop thinking. You're not thinking for yourself at all. You basically just hit the switch off in your brain and blame somebody else.
That's precisely correct. What you want to be able to do is to keep an open mind. So let's say even if the guy you're up against is a hacker and you're the hack user and you're upset about it, chances are, even if that's true, you still made a mistake. Maybe not making the mistake wouldn't have saved you because the guy was a dirty, filthy hacker, but regardless, you probably still didn't play perfectly, and it's really important to be able to look at your own play, like from an objective standpoint, and say, how can I do this better next time? Let's look at the exact situation I was in. Should I have pushed that corner? Should I have attempted to engage that guy in a 1v1? You know, I'm in a biolab like kidRiot here, and I see this guy and I chase him because I want to get the kill, and then I get shot from some guy from a rooftop that I didn't know was there. You know, did I overextend? Instead of saying, oh, the game's just BS and I'm going to die to random stuff sometimes, which is really tempting to do in a game as freeform as Planetside, you can say, did I overextend? Should I have been there in the first place? What did that really accomplish relative to the goals I'm trying to accomplish? So being self-critical like that and being able to analyze, identify when you're making a mistake and acknowledging the mistake is like super important. Once you've identified and acknowledged a mistake, the next most difficult part, and I say all this stuff, it sounds very simple, but in reality this is the hardest part of learning, especially when you're trying to do this on your own and you don't have a coach or a teacher. You've got to figure out what caused the mistake. Like I said, stuff like, was I overextended? Did I just not shoot well enough? Was it a perfectly equitable situation and the guy just outshot me? Do I need to work on my shot? Or, you know, maybe I need to headshot better because, I hit every shot, but they were all body shots, and each head shot me down, so his time to kill was lower. Stuff like that. You've really got to figure out the cause of them and then work on improving them. Going back to discipline within the structure of having goals and having structured practice and repetition. So you've figured out you have a problem, or you've identified it, acknowledged it, figured out the cause of what's causing the problem, and then you can practice to fix it. Thoughts, kidRiot?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about what you were saying. Like you said, nobody's perfect, and I agree. And then sometimes we do rage. Even like the best of us, you get upset, and I think emotion plays a huge role into how focused you are too. Like there's this, I'm going to kind of break off. There's this analogy or this metaphor that this guy was using, and he's talking about emotional intelligence, and he says basically the intelligence is a rider and an elephant, and the elephant's your emotion. And when you think about that, like how it plays into Planetside too, like say that one guy at a base kills you, and so your first thought more than likely is, I want to get that guy back. So you automatically spawn and you run to like the same area, focused on maybe taking this guy out. Now somebody's there, so you're maybe like looking in different directions, trying to make sure he doesn't get the jump on you. But because you're so focused on this guy, you may as well be a horse with blinders. So your mentality automatically is shifted and really confined, and you're not really open where you need to be, like thinking about, okay, who's there, what angles do I need to be looking at, am I even in the right fight, should I even be doing this? Like sometimes we take things personally, and that's kind of like when using the metaphor that elephant gets out of control, right? You stop thinking rationally and you're more like emotional about things, and so it's really easy to slip into that.
There's a term used for this, it's called tilt.
Yeah.
I've heard it used a lot in competitive play. I'm sure people use it in more casual play as well. When you start to do badly, you're frustrated about it, and your decision making becomes worse because you're frustrated about it. You make more mistakes, and you're even less likely to notice you're making them and solve them. So that brings us to frustration, something we all deal with.
I just experienced them right now.
I'm a pretty nice guy in general, but in private and on TeamSpeak, I've been known to rage a little bit every now and then when things aren't going my way.
Yeah, I mean, right now is a perfect example. Like I ran into two guys, but because my ping just shot up, I had this weird hit detection issue. Killed one, but then died to the other. I'm totally ready to raise the BS flag on that one. But it's just, you have to understand that it's part of the game. But go ahead, Pony.
I was just reading Passionate Lover here's comment. Mentality is one thing, I suppose he means, but giving you the means to achieve the goals. Good rig, good sense, right loadout are the first steps to me. I don't necessarily agree with that perspective. What you're basically saying, if you say that, is, I can't do any better because I don't have the means. This is it. I can't shoot or play any better because my computer is bad. I don't have the right guns, so I can't play any better. I can't improve until I've got those things out of the way first. I think that is a really dangerous way to start thinking about things. Oh, I thought that dude was talking. I was like, I didn't swear. Okay. It's a really dangerous way to start thinking about things, because once you fall into that trap, you start making excuses. And you don't want to make excuses for yourself. You want to say, what could I have done better, even if it's a little thing. So you're saying, maybe I'm a default character on the starting loadout, but my positioning still could have been better. Maybe I know I'm on the starting loadout, so I should not have pushed that guy as if I had like my maxed out nano and all this other jazz that I'm used to using. Maybe I should have played differently because I understand my limitations. That's good mentality. Bad mentality is excuse making. If you ever find yourself making excuses, you got to say, you know what, I should take a step back here, become objective, and think about, well, there had to have been something I could have done better, even if it wouldn't have made a huge difference. Because little differences matter over time.
Yeah, and then we talk about how solo play also refers to like the context of what you're doing. So like if you're on a TeamSpeak and you start to vent your frustrations, like say when you're like in a squad of guys and 3 or 4 people are talking, it can be pretty chaotic, and it does weigh down. I'm not complaining about complaining, but when you do vent your frustrations in a moment when people are trying to focus, it's really distracting. So basically, the few people who you actually want to be promoting, cohesive, being a cohesive, having good communication, things like that.
Yeah, that's getting into team play stuff, though. We'll cover that later.
Yeah.
So frustration, we were talking about it. I will say that I think frustration and feeling like game rage and general rage when things aren't going your way, and when especially if you're practicing and you're trying to improve, and you expect better of yourself, and you do something boneheaded, and we all do it. I do it more than others, maybe. You do something boneheaded when you know better, and you fail as a result of it. It gets very, very frustrating. And I think that's unavoidable. I'm not going to give you the advice that you should, meditate and sit down and just let things go and all this other generic crap people say that you really can't actually implement in real life because it's like impossible. You get angry. But I will say this, you have to try to not let it demoralize you. You're going to feel angry. You got to find a way to let that rage go. Like, feel it. Even if you can embrace it and use it to focus, but you can't let it get you down to the point where you just shut down and you're not even trying anymore. And you have to be able to identify, hey, you know what? I'm at that point. I am to the point where I am no longer getting anything useful out of this. You got to take a break. Especially if you're going for like long stretches. I used to practice infantry play for 4 to 6 hours a day, solo infantry play, and it was a grind. Like by the end of it, you're just worn out and frustrated, and you just got to take breaks in it. You got to say, you know what, I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna take 10 minutes here. I'm gonna eat some food. I'm gonna get some food in me. I'm gonna drink some water. I'm gonna go do something else for a few minutes and reflect on what I've done. That's important. But if you let it demoralize you, you tilt, and then you go down a really bad path where you're not learning anything. You're wasting your time. Go on, kid.
Yeah, I was gonna say like when it does happen to me, when I do start to get frustrated, I basically just remove myself. Right? Either you take a break, or if you want to keep playing, just do something different. Like if you're doing infantry fights and you keep kind of dying to the same thing, and you see, your enjoyment's kind of hitting the toilet, like go fly something, go gun for somebody, go do something else. There's so many things to do in this game that sometimes like you get kind of, you think your options are limited, but really it's essentially whatever you want to do. And I think that's the one thing about frustration is that you start to feel like your options are limited. It's like your hand starts to feel forced, and that's nothing further from the truth. But these guys in chat are saying about rigs and computer stuff, and I agree. Like there comes a point too, though, that you kind of have to have like a baseline of FPS, and I think the way you set up your graphics settings. Like if you notice, a lot of the guys that play or that stream on on Twitch, they use basically low settings because they get to see more, and so it's one of those things where you have to decide. Do I want my game to look pretty, or do I want to be more effective? Do I want to be able to win more than I lose? And sometimes, just regardless of what any game it is, right? Even Counter-Strike. Like the pros in Counter-Strike, even at max graphic settings, it looks the same to me. But the pros there minimize their graphic settings, and it's basically just for clarity of vision, being able to see things as they come.
No Instruction says there are a lot of good players that play on less than amazing computers. I'm going to say that I fit into that category. My computer is 4 years old. I never got better than 30 frames per second in Counter-Strike, in Planetside 2. I always played with a severe handicap. But I was still able to get to the point where I didn't feel that there was more than a handful of people in the game who could beat me consistently on foot. I was still when I solo pubbed, I was still solo medic. I was still getting 5 to 6 KD on foot. I was still beating almost everybody 1v1. I just understood the limitations of my rig and I played around it. Maybe a guy with a better rig could aggressively push a corner that I couldn't because I'm at a slight disadvantage here. But because I didn't shut myself down with the my computer's bad mentality, I'll never get any better at this because it's impossible because my computer's bad, I was able to improve. And I had an onus, I had to do it because I was leading a squad on a competitive team. I didn't have the luxury of making excuses. I simply had to perform and I had to find a way to do it. If you're a more casual player, you don't have the onus to do that, but it will still help you if you didn't take a more negative approach, I think.
Yeah, and then it talked about kind of you have to pick the right fights. If your computer's slower, unfortunately, you might be limited to certain fights. But at the same time, it ties into something that it ties into something really important. And I think that's picking fights. As a solo player, the guys that do this every day, or the guys and girls that do this every day, know which fights to pick instinctively. But if you're a new player and you're trying to improve not just your level of enjoyment, but the quality of your play, picking the right fights is probably the single most important thing you could do. That not only will give you a decent chance, more than about a 50-50 chance, but kind of keep you on the level, right? If you go into a fight that you're massively outpopped and you manage to get outside of the spawn room, there's probably 4 or 5 guys looking at you, 4 or 5 other players. But in a decent fight, an even popped fight, or perhaps even your team slightly over popping, it makes a huge difference because now when you approach, it's more or less, there's less danger, less risk involved. And measuring risk is a huge part of, especially when you're a solo player, of what you decide to engage in. Do I push this room, or do I round this corner, or is it worth even me being here? Should I redeploy?
Going back to discipline, if you have goals and structure to your practice, if there's something you're trying to improve upon, every fight you go to should be deliberate. You should be looking at this fight and saying, this is a place where I can work on this thing. This is I want to go to biolabs, because in biolabs I can really work on my LOL max farm or something like that, right? There's a reason you're going there, and it's deliberate, it's thoughtful. At least that was always my approach, and I really think that's the best way to do it. We should take questions, because we're about halfway through, so... Do you guys have any questions on solo play? Solo mentality? Stuff relating to getting better as an individual?
It seems most of them are talking about... It seems like most of them are talking about performance.
Well, they're entitled to do that in chat. That's fine. Just give a few seconds, see if any questions come in, and if not, we'll move on to team play.
Well, let's talk about performance. Okay, so say you average 30 FPS. So how did you adjust your? Obviously we're infantry players. How did you adjust your aim or your positioning because of your low FPS? Do you think you played differently than somebody maybe with a steady 60?
And I got to play at a fairly low FPS at home for a year. It makes a difference. I won't lie, it makes a big difference.
Right,
that doesn't mean you can't perform well with low FPS.
No, I agree. You just kind of be a little more show a little more ingenuity and creativity in how you approach fights. But let's say an average player gets 30 FPS. So what kind of things can they do to make sure that they get more enjoyment out of the game? Or that they get an equal amount of enjoyment, we should say.
Well, as long as they're used to playing on the same rig and the same settings and the same performance all the time, you get used to that. You learn to play around that. Your play style is affected by it. But if you're you play 2 days a week on a great rig and you play 5 days a week on a bad rig, you have to understand that you can play differently on both. Your ability to win 1v1s against people with higher frame rates is different on a higher frame rate computer, so you can be more aggressive, but it's... That's some minutia stuff. Passionate Lover here has a question. How would you pick fights while playing solo? I don't know about kidRiot, but once again I would say make sure the fights you're going to are deliberate in the first place. If I want to work on my straight up 1v1 small scale stuff, my little tiny squad based stuff, I'm going to look for tiny little fights against ghost cappers. So what I would always do when I was practicing is I'd go to one of the deader continents. I don't know if you can still do that with Lattice Lock, but I used to go to what was that? The mountain continent.
Amerish.
Sorry, I've got brain disease. I used to go to Amherst, and I would look for little outfits that were, little 5 or 6 guy outfits that were ghost capping, and I'd go 1v5 them. Because I knew I'd get into a lot of situations there. Yeah, it wouldn't be fair, and I probably wouldn't stop them. Maybe I would. Sometimes I would. But, I didn't expect to stop them from taking the base. But what I did expect to do is get a lot of 1v1, 2v1, and 3v1 practice. And how do I engage those? How do I identify those? How do I not overextend? How do I manipulate these people? That's a good way, if I'm working on that, that's what I do. But if I'm just straight up, trying to work on my shot, I just want, good reaction time. I'll go to a heavier fight, and I'll, especially if I'm trying to practice, because I used to have, with a poor computer, I had to practice playing under bad conditions, because we were practicing for 48s, and there was a chance that we'd get into, 36v36 on some lanes or something like that. I had to be able to play under poor performance, so I'd sometimes go to a big fight and just see, how well can I do? What's my reaction time like? How much can I get here out of this? So once again, make your fight picking deliberate, and make sure you're getting something out of it, but that you're really thoughtful about how you're going about it.
Yeah, and it really depends too. You always talk about context. If you're an infantry player, a good fight for you would look different than maybe a pilot or a tanker. So I'm looking at the map right now. Just to kind of make this a little dynamic. So I would say Xenotech. You also got to take into consideration the layout of the base. So some bases, if they outpop you, there's almost 100% chance that you would not pick it. But some bases, like on the new Hassan, where even if you're outpopped, maybe the spawns aren't suppressed because of the layout of the base, so you can pick it and be relatively safe. But I would say as a solo player, you kind of almost always want to err on the side of caution, right? You always want to pick a safe fight. So I look at the map right now, I would say Xenotech, bad, because even if you spawn at the teleporter, they just have so much suppression on the point, and because of the way the spawn room is laid out, that it's super exposed, that this is not a good fight. So then you look at even Zervan storage, obviously not a good fight, because the overpop is just massively against you. Now Rust Mesa is pretty interesting because, with the pop now it's not, but it's interesting because the only way to really get to the spawn room is from the air. So you always got to take into consideration, what does the base look like? You could. There's nothing wrong with deploying at a base and looking at it. So we go to Rust Mesa. I could spawn there and look at it and see what's going on. That's the beauty of the system. In the spawn room, you're safe, unless a friendly throws grenades. That's pretty rare. You're usually not gonna get hurt inside of the spawn room. But you could tell when you spawn at a base that they're just.
I used to do a lot of spawn farming because it was a really towards the end of practice, when all I wanted was muscle memory stuff and I was already kind of mentally worn down. I would go to just spawn camp farms where I just control weapon recoil. That was all it was. Look at target identification, threat analysis, where you're just this is an easy kill or that's a hard kill. You can identify when you have time to close out a kill and when you don't, and you're just controlling weapon recoil. It's relaxing.
Yeah, but even then, they're going to be changing the way that whole system works as far as experience and stuff.
True enough.
And I'm glad for the change, because it's never a good situation. But that's kind of way off topic. So let's I think we're halfway, right? Yeah, let's break into the team aspects.
Okay. So team mentality is different than solo mentality, though once again, solo mentality always applies. So all of those things, even when you're considering how you play as a teammate, you go through the same process. You're like, I have to have things I'm working on. Maybe I'm a jerk of a teammate, and I have to be focused on not being a jerk. That's my goal. And I'm gonna take this practice time, and it's gonna be structured, and I'm gonna repetitiously attempt to cease my jerkiness, and etc. etc. So keep in mind the solo stuff still is applicable, but for teams. You won't get better as a team unless you play together, and you won't play together if you have bad attitudes. You won't want to get on and play with a bunch of dudes who are just jerks, right? You're not going to be inspired to do that. Much like solo play, you'll have a better and more efficient time with your practice if you are a good teammate, and if you are a good leader, if you're the leader. So, it's really important to improving as a crew to have good mentality. I would argue even more important than with solo play, because with solo play, even if you're just a beast to yourself and you're constantly raging and you're just miserable, you can still improve in some physical muscle memory ways. But with team play, it's all synergy and psychology with each other. And if you have a bad mentality, it's never going to get any better. it's just going to be a disaster. So, thoughts, kid?
I was gonna say that if you have to mute somebody in your own outfit, then something's wrong.
Yes, this is true. I only ever had to do that one time. Though I did have a guy in my squad that a couple of people did mute. I always gave him heck for it.
Yeah, and I think I mean the team isn't the team without the individuals, and sometimes a lot of people forget that. Because like I think we talked about last week how every outfit has their own culture, right? They have a way, they have certain names for things. You know, they like certain outfits, they dislike certain outfits. So every outfit's different, and depending on the type of outfit you join determines the culture. But you never like really understand that until you're actually part of the outfit. So I mean, let's talk about like a common scenario, and this really plays into like the way people perceive things too. Is that typically when people talk about Zerg fits, it's always in a negative connotation. Like I don't think I've ever heard the term Zerg used in a positive way. And so when people talk about Zerg fit and then start to automatically label outfits, you know, within that context, it's never a good thing, because one, I'm sure those leaders don't think of themselves as that way, and two, when you're part of that outfit and you see people talking about your outfit in a certain way, regardless of how, you know, we can distance ourselves from media or whatever it is, it still does bother you. It affects you. I don't care who you are. If somebody's going to say something about you, whether it's true or not, it does affect you in some way. And so it's like why would you even go out of your way to say super negative things about somebody when you may not even understand things? Because when you look at
all I have to say about Zerg fits is every time somebody uses the word Zerg in a negative context, a Jadon cries.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I mean that even goes beyond kind of what we're talking about here, but it ties into the community of Planetside too, which is really small, and it's kind of like, you know, without these so-called Zerg fits, you know, farm outfits that specifically farm would have like almost no reason for existence, right? They wouldn't have anybody to farm, or outfits that do like armor stuff or air stuff wouldn't have anybody to fight. So
it's like an ecosystem.
It is, exactly. And regardless of what kind of outfit you're in, everybody that plays the game, you know, on a level of like just we're talking about gameplay matters, because the players are the game. You know, and without the players, there's no game. I think it's kind of, well, to me, it's that simple. And I mean,
Passionate Lover says, is it dangerous to recruit competent guys over guys you're more likely to get along with? It is a fine line. Well, it depends on what your your mandate is. If you're a competitive outfit like Nuck was, you have an onus to recruit people who are good. We cannot have poor players. Not to say that we didn't have a few, but you know, we try to mitigate it because you have to perform. You just can't have a guy who can't perform. But you also can't have a guy who's a giant jerk. If he's just totally mean and makes the experience miserable for everybody, he is a detriment. It does not matter how good he is. And we had a couple of those throughout our time as well. They ended up benched just like the really bad players ended up benched. It just happens that way.
yeah,
If you are a more casual outfit, you should always be recruiting people that you want to be playing with. There's just no reason to be like, this guy's amazing, we need him, when he's a complete jerk and I don't have fun playing with him. But I mean, you don't have a mandate to perform, right? Like, your mandate is to get out there and have fun every day so that people, you know, get home from work and have a beer and play some Planetside can enjoy themselves. So it really depends on what your focus is. If you're somewhere in between, like I think a lot of outfits are, you know, they want to be good, but they also want to be enjoyable, then you just have to walk the line. You have to say, you know, here's where we draw the line. This guy is too much of a jerk, or this guy's just a little too bad. You know, we'd much rather prefer people in the middle. But I will say, I would rather on my squad somebody who is a worse player, who is much more open to criticism, listens to orders, is nice and congenial, shows up on time, than a good player who's just a complete wreck as a teammate. Much prefer, because at least with a worse player I can give him a more passive support role and he can still perform in a slightly less skill intensive way and not be a detriment.
yeah, I think it's a huge thing. I mean, I think the only scenario that I would potentially deal with somebody who I didn't get along with was if there was money in the line, but that's nothing at all to do with Planetside. But I think a lot of it, I mean, attitude ties in with so much, right? It's not just like how you prepare for things, or it's how you execute things, like the quality of your communication with your team. I mean, some outfits don't really have to communicate everything, right? Because ultimately, and this is what it boils down to, is that we all play this for its entertainment value. I mean, regardless of whether you're more competitive than somebody or not, at the base aspect of this game, it's really basically just entertainment, right? It's how much fun you get, and so different outfits can communicate different and still be effective. Like you could have some outfits who, or are basically talking what they did last Friday night while they're in a serious mode, or you have some outfits that can't do that. They can't function that way. Like they need a little bit more discipline and strict communication. So that's really an aspect too of like what we talk about is outfits. And you, as an individual, you basically have to find the outfit that fits, what you want to get out of the game. And so that's really a huge part of, like your whole mentality behind the game too, is that it's fine to be solo, but when you want to be part of somebody else's outfit, it's their vision. But if their vision can match yours, then it's awesome. It works out.
So moving on to some more kind of meaty stuff, positivity. We talked about frustration in solo play. I'm going to talk about positivity in group play. Because as a solo player, like I said, you don't have to be the most positive guy in the world. Just don't let yourself tilt so hard you're not improving. But with a team, you actually do have to be positive. Your mood affects your teammates. It doesn't matter if you're the leader or if you're you're a passive support medic. It doesn't matter. If you are in a completely miserable mood, it brings everyone else down. It brings their performance down physically in the game as well as mentally. They'll make worse decisions. They will play worse. So you've got to try to maintain some positivity. Even the tone of your voice, like just the tone of your voice. I had a player who I thought that I was... I didn't realize how stern I was coming across at times. Apparently, with this player, he was good. I would have liked to keep him, but he actually washed out because he thought that I was being too critical and that I was too mean. When I didn't even intend it to be that way. It was just the tone of my voice.
I want it so bad.
And if I had just taken a slightly different approach, if I had been conscious of the problem, I could have kept that good player. But I didn't because I was a baddie bad. I learned a lesson from it, right? So the tone of your voice, it doesn't matter whether you're the leader. If I'm the teammate, if I play heavy and I'm on point with an aggressive medic who plays with me and we push doors together, and it doesn't go well. We push and we get wiped, and I'm just like, damn, couldn't you have done that a little better or something like that? Even if it's true, and even if it's good feedback, even if a mistake was made, if I say it in the wrong way, people can shut down. People can get defensive, and nothing is learned from it. So you've got to avoid, being that jerk teammate. You've got to be conscious of the way you sound and how you're interacting with your teammates.
Yeah, and you also got to take into consideration the fact that you don't see the person you're talking to, so you can't vibe off their body language. It's basically all in tonality and all in what you say, and sometimes it's really easy to get the wrong message across. And it really does affect how things kind of play out in the server, because if somebody feels like they're like somebody basically just belittled them or whatever, they start to resent things. And then I've seen it, and I think it happens a lot in outfits, and it sounds kind of strange because of the way we're talking about it, but when you actually talk to people, a lot of it happens where like people have these ideas where like it's not I don't understand why you said that. And actually I'll give you a perfect example, and I know we're talking about mentality, but I think communication and attitude is huge. Like when I went to SOE Live, I had made a comment a long time ago about a certain outfit, and this was during like one of my shows or whatever. And at SOE Live, this guy must have been holding on to this for a while. He came up to me and he asked me like, "What did you mean by that?" And so I saw that it had really upset him, and I realized that what had upset him was basically him misunderstanding what I was trying to say. So I was able to clarify it to him. But that's the advantage of looking somebody in the face and shaking their hand and talking to him. A lot of the times that just doesn't happen. Like some outfits may have certain attitudes, and if your attitude doesn't fit, then you're basically essentially screwed. So like I said, it's really about just finding the right outfit and what fits for you. But let's keep going.
Yeah, if you don't take this stuff in mind, like if you have a negative mentality and you drive people away, it is self-defeating. Like even if you're just like, you're just being a hippie, or whatever. Sorry if there's any hippies out there. I mean, no offense. And you're just being all lovey-dovey. Everybody gives each other hugs and everything's positive. If you don't embrace this, the reality is you will perform worse because your teammates will be performing worse. Everybody will be performing poorly. So it is very, very, very important to maintain positivity in a team environment.
We're running low on time, so you want to jump ahead to like something like communication? Like your call-outs and things like that?
Communication is a really broad and important topic, but next on my little agenda here, I had leadership after positivity, because leadership is different than, so like, there's things you do mentally as a leader, and there's things you do as a teammate. Which one do you want to cover first?
Do leader.
Okay, leadership. So, if you're the leader of a squad or an outfit, the number one piece of mentality advice I will give you is be aware of your role. That you are in fact one cog in the machine of this outfit, and this outfit has an objective. Win this, beat that, take bases, be the best, whatever it is. You are not a cult. You are not the god of all, you're not the lord of all, okay? You have to understand that your role is to get the most out of people. Is to make sure that your outfit is successful, whatever that means. And oftentimes that means being humble, taking suggestions, generally being a positive figure instead of being an overbearing, I can't think of a polite word to say on stream, so I won't. So yes, understand your role, be aware of it, be conscious of it. Second, you've got to keep things structured. Okay, things much like solo practice for the group has to be structured. You have to have, it has to be deliberate. When you're picking fights, the fight has to be deliberate. Very similar to solo play. We're going to this fight for this reason. We're working on this thing. Okay, or maybe we're not a competitive outfit. We're going to this fight to take this base. There is a goal here, and we are going to accomplish it. And it has to be an achievable goal. If you set unachievable goals all the time, you're going to demoralize people. You demoralize your team, everybody performs poorly, their mood gets bad, everything falls apart. So you have to keep things achievable, winnable. People have to feel victories, they have to see improvement. Any thoughts so far, Kid?
Yeah, I would say, because I know, like, I tend to be pretty reckless in my personal choices of picking fights. Like, I kind of like, I'm almost like, do what I say, not what I do. But when it comes to outfits, like you're saying, you're just a cog. But it's your responsibility more than anything to make sure that you guys are having fun. And, you know, some people can't take that, and some people do. And I think the most successful outfits are the ones where their leadership knows what to do so that their outfit can have fun. And we're going to talk about any outfit, from, like, you know, your biggest to your smallest outfit. It's all about making sure that you guys enjoy, or that your guys and girls enjoy what they're doing. And a lot of it has to do with the objectives that you set before the outfit and what you deem as successful. Because, like, a lot of people talk about meta, but when you talk about, like, outfits specifically and what success means, like you got to really determine that and define what you mean by success. Like, for me, basically, success means we accomplish the goal we set out for ourselves. That's it. And so if you, as the outfit leader or squad leader or platoon leader, can say that we're going to do this, and yeah, maybe it's sloppy or maybe it's smooth, but it happens, then it's a really good feeling, right? Like, guys kind of relax, they laugh about it. So, and it plays into everything else we've been talking about, you know, attitude, communication, cohesiveness, synergy, and all this basically stems from the alpha leader.
And you can communicate these things to your team too. I, as a squad leader, I would often pick a fight, and I would say, guys, we're going to this fight. We are not going to take this base. This is too much for us. Our goal here is to see how long we can hold out on this point, and I want to see clean execution. Okay, I really want to see this.
I'm dead.
And then we'd do it, and we'd wipe, and I'd be like, okay, could we have lasted longer on that point? And then we'd talk about it, right? See, we got something out of it. Even though the base was untakeable, I did not set an unachievable goal in a specific fight, even though the fight was unwinnable, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, and sometimes those are like the funnest moments, because we were talking about that last week, right? Like those, you know, your back's against the ropes kind of moments. Some outfits, I know, and when I was in Recursion, we called them like the Alamo moments, where basically you just do what you can and survive as long as you can. And sometimes those situations are a lot of fun. So it's like, I mean, your structure can be, you know, loose, but there always has to be like a next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And sometimes even as a platoon leader, like you're looking at the map or whatever it is, you know, as a leader, and you have to spend more time studying the game, learning how things flow. But that's your role, right? You're the leader. And so as long as you're able to keep things kind of going smoothly, I mean, and it doesn't always happen that way, right? But as long as your main objective is that your outfit and your guys have fun, then I think everything else kind of falls into place little by little as you learn.
Yeah. Yeah, super important. I say that a lot because all this stuff is super important. Moving on, leadership. I have down here, be aware of different personality types. This was one of the things that took me the longest to figure out as a squad leader. Probably took me 3 or 4 months before I really appreciated how important this was. But different people under your leadership will respond differently to criticism, and you have to give people criticism because the reason you exist as a leader is to provide structure and to give feedback to the people under you so that they know how they can improve for the team. And if I go to one person, if I go to player A and I say, player A, you did a really crappy job, that needs to be better, please work on that.
Oof.
That player might be the kind of player that goes, yeah, you're right, I'm going to work on that, I want to do better. He also might be the kind of player who says, immediately, I'm on the defensive.
Yeah.
I'm just shutting down now. I don't want to hear that. That is mean. His tone was mean. That's just wrong. So two different players can take the same criticism very differently. And once again, your goal, your objective, the reason you exist is to get the most out of your team. Sure, if you're the outfit leader or whatever, you could just replace people. You could just say, you know what, this guy, gone. He doesn't fit in here. Replace him with someone who can take my kind of criticism. But that kind of leadership style leads to a lot of burnout in a lot of people. The best approach, in my opinion, and this does come down to some degree to opinion and the kind of culture you want to build with your outfit, but my opinion is always like, try to adapt to the individual you're leading. Passionate Lover says, as a leader, can you question yourself in front of your team? I did all the time. I leaned on my team for my leadership to some degree. I said, hey guys, if you've got a better suggestion, give it to me. Or what did you guys think of that? Could we have done this or that better? I trusted the people I worked with. I worked with them for over a year. I felt very strong. We were very strongly bonded, so I could do that. Initially, when you're trying to establish some credibility, it can be a bad idea to question yourself a lot. But once you've got a rapport, your teammates are an extremely valuable resource you should be making use of as often as possible.
Yeah, and I would honestly say, like what you were saying, that you have to understand too that questioning yourself. I mean, we're not at war, right? Like we could always respawn and talk about things, but when you do question yourself, it does kind of, if you're not established, if people don't have trust in you, it does kind of make you look a little shaky and hesitant. And especially as a leader or even as a solo player, like one of the worst things you could do too is hesitate about things. Like it's almost better to go 100% in on a bad call than to go, half-assed on a good call. Because
it's not almost better, it is better.
Yeah, it is. Because even if it's a bad call, if everybody participates and does what they can, you never know what's going to happen, right? It's like the nature of the game. You never know. It might even work out in your favor. But automatically, if you go half in, good or bad call, I mean, there's almost no point.
I have a personal mantra I literally live by. I use it in my career. I use it all the time. And that is, indecision is the wrong decision. Period. It is never the right call to be indecisive.
No, and I think honestly, like as far as outfits and the way they're organized, that's what your officers are for, right? That's what the other leadership is for. I mean, if you're hesitant to question yourself in front of your outfit, you could always go to forums and talk about things, whatever IRC, take a break outside of the ops, talk to your other officers and say, hey, was this the right call? What could I have done better? Because I have to admit that when I was leading, like I went the opposite way, right? When I was in charge of recursion, and this is just me being honest, like I went the opposite way of hesitation. Instead of questioning myself, I thought I had everything set, right? I thought like I had a vision, I had a path, and I was, damn basically everybody else, I was going to make the outfit go this way. And that really works against you because all of a sudden you have this goal, this dream or whatever, and you're the only person participating. Yeah, your outfit's there. Yeah, they come to ops, but if they don't feel like they're part of what you want to do with your outfit, then there's automatically this distance, happening, and that's never good. And so
you want your team to have a stake in what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yes, seek feedback and be approachable. It's very, very important as a leader. You should ask people, hey, do you like what I'm doing? If you don't want to do it in front of everybody, though I always, every night, did it in front of everybody. After ops, after practice, I would say, hey guys, how'd you feel about tonight? What did we do well? What did we do poorly? What did I do well? What did I do poorly? What can we do next time? Every single night for a year. Literally, we practiced 7 nights a week, and I think I only missed 2 in a year. So I got a lot of feedback, and that's what helped me improve. It's very important. And that means being able to take feedback, being able to take criticism from people. Sometimes what they say is not going to be correct. And it's important to not get into fights with people about it. But a lot of times what people will say is valuable. Maybe it's an approach or a way you hadn't thought about it before, and you can learn a lot from it. So if you think you're just the cat's behind and you have nothing to learn from anybody, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're just grinding your gears and wasting your time.
Yeah,
You got to be approachable. If you're not approachable, people who would give you good feedback might think, oh, gee, I don't want to make the boss angry. I don't want to say something bad about him, and they won't give you feedback, which means valuable information that could be improving you, ergo improving the team, is sitting idle because they think you're not approachable, and that's also really bad. I used to go out of my way to, me and another one of my teammates, who I'm a longtime friend with, we used to go out of our way to try and, whenever we had a new squad member, we would try to do things with them outside of the game. We'd say, hey, after practice, you want to come play this other game with us and hang out and stuff, so that they would get used to the idea that they were welcome, that they were wanted, and that we were friends, that they could approach me with anything.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that's really interesting, like the dynamic. I shouldn't say dynamic, but how people look at their outfits. I mean, some outfits aren't just outfits, right? They're clans or communities. And I mean, I want to talk about SW Live again. That when you saw these guys get together, or I keep saying guys, but it's just my my pronoun. When you saw people get together from certain outfits, or from the same outfit, it was really awesome to see how they got along. Maybe they met each other for the first time. You have that kind of awkward stage, but basically you get to meet the people that you play with on a day-to-day basis. And people tend to think of these as like, I don't know, as communities almost, right? It's not just an outfit; it's a community of people I like to play with. And when you can establish that kind of feeling with your people, it's a really, really good feeling. I would say that's almost like the height of how well an outfit works together. Is that once people start to feel like they look forward to logging on and playing with each other because of that feeling, right? And I mean, the best outfits have that down to a T. But it doesn't just come automatically. It comes through time. Because like with any community or family or whatever you want to call it, not everybody always gets along. And so even when somebody disagrees with you as a leader or whatever it is, how you deal with that disagreement and how you settle that conflict determines a lot of how everybody else is going to think about things or react. So there's a lot more to it than just saying, hey, putting a waypoint on something and let's go here and do this. You got, like you said, you got to look at the personalities of your people involved. And I mean, when you talk about large outfits, that would be my one criticism of them, is that potentially they may not be looking at everybody as a person, or as an individual. They just kind of might get washed out. They might be just like the fourth medic in Squad B or whatever. But like I said, that all comes down to how your squad leaders act and all your other leadership. But anyway, I think I'm getting off topic.
So we're pressed for time, but we still have one more topic. Can we take another 10 minutes?
Yeah, it's fine.
We can run over? All right.
Yeah.
Cool. We don't have another show after us or something. Okay, so the last topic that we're going to discuss before we take final questions is similar to leadership. It is being a teammate, the mentality of being a teammate. That is, you are not the leader, but you are still working with other people, and what is the correct way to act? What is most beneficial? The core of this, the core philosophy, for me, is that when you're a teammate, you are just as responsible for the success of your team as your leader is. You are no more, no less important. That means there is an onus on you to point out mistakes and watch each other's backs. So, let's say that I'm a medic and I play on a heavy. If I see my heavy make an error, I'm not going to wait for the leader to point it out. After practice, not during practice, but after practice, I'm going to go to him and I'm going to say, hey, you did this thing or that thing and this thing, and I don't think that was correct. And if everybody is doing that for each other, if everybody's watching out for each other's mistakes, discussing them, everybody will improve more rapidly. So passing the buck and saying, oh, I'm just going to show up and not contribute, you're not pulling your weight as a teammate, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it also, once you communicate like that, it builds trust. I mean, there's nothing like worse than, breaching a room and feeling like you're not secure because your teammates aren't covering you, or they're not aware of, what's going on, or their game sense is so low that you're basically, you may as well be by yourself. But a lot of that comes from just practice and leadership.
Now, this doesn't mean be a jerk. Remember when we talked about being a jerk and how it's self-defeating and no one likes a jerk teammate? You can't just be like, you're all bad, I'm good, everybody needs to listen to me. It cannot be like that. It has to be, hey, I saw you do this thing, let's talk about it. Why is it good? Why is it bad? How can we be better? It's always got to be like that. It's a debate. It's a discussion. It is not an argument or a fight. Because if it's an argument or a fight, it just turns into who shouts loudest and nobody learns anything, which is really bad. Once again, you've wasted time, and worse than that, you've damaged your synergy and your trust between each other, which is very detrimental to a team working together. So, trust each other, discuss things, don't argue, and don't be afraid to speak up and point out errors to people. Next, offer suggestions to your squad leader. If your squad leader is the kind of guy who doesn't want to hear a damn thing you have to say, he's probably not a very good squad leader.
Yeah, I was about to say he's not a good squad leader.
Yeah, I every single night, like, I would literally, I don't know, I'm not the world's hugest nerd, but okay, I do watch a bit of Star Trek. If you've ever watched Star Trek, the captains on that show are always saying, if they can't solve a problem, they're saying, suggestions, crew, tell me what to do. That's true in leadership.
Me too.
Many times, we didn't have too many matches because there wasn't structured competitive play, but, if we were faced with a situation and I racked my brain, it's a tight time constraint thing, I have to solve this in the next 30 seconds and I don't know what to do, I would spend 10 seconds thinking about it, and if I couldn't come to a conclusion, I would just ask, suggestions, anyone got an idea? And oftentimes people would. Usually it was the same few people, admittedly, but, I knew that there were 3 or 4 guys that I could rely on, that if I couldn't solve the problem, they could, and if none of us could, then we needed to really stop and think about it after practice. So yes, offer suggestions as a teammate. Don't be afraid to do that. It's an important part of the leadership process to rely on those around you. To rely on your... I don't like the term subordinates. I really don't.
No, that's terrible. That's like the military.
Yeah. The flip side of that is to accept leadership during play. If your leader makes a call, like if you offer a suggestion and he doesn't take it, you can't get pissed about it. You can't get mad about it. You have to just let it slide. And afterwards, you can talk about why you thought it was a good idea and why it should have been done. This happened a lot. Once again, this happened a lot with me, where someone would offer a suggestion, I would shoot it down. I would say, no, we're doing this. I would just make a decisive call, and I would be wrong. And afterwards, we'd sit and we'd discuss it after practice. And I would say, you know what? You were probably right. Next time we're going to do that. And then the next time we'd try that. And if that worked next time, we'd go, oh, that's a really good thing. Thanks for pointing, that's now our new policy. This is our de facto strat.
Yeah, and that ties into what we were saying earlier about just go all in no matter what. Because you could always learn from it. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? You respawn or whatever. You have to move bases.
Yes.
So there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yes, but you do not want to argue during play. Accept leadership during play. Just accept what your leader says. After practice, you can talk about it. After practice, debate about it. Argue about it, sure. But not during play, because if you argue about it during play, all you're doing is invalidating the practice. You learn nothing from it. When I say practice in Valid Face, I realize that's kind of an outdated term, but every outfit pretty much has organized ops of some sort or another, and if you're seriously concerned about getting better, after ops, you'll spend the last 5 minutes of ops talking about what you did. That's the number one way to get better, whether you're competitive or not. It's just... once again, I don't know if you missed the beginning of the show, but identifying your mistakes, acknowledging them, and finding out ways to fix them. And doing that in a team environment takes discussion and debate.
Actually, I want them to stay.
The last thing I have down for being a good teammate is accepting assigned positions. So sometimes your squad leader might give you a role you really don't want. Sure, like a debrief. Flaniank says like a debrief, and I would say yes, that is similar, except more democratic, I guess. So, accepting assigned position. Sometimes you'll be given a position or a role you don't like. This happened a lot with my team members. Sometimes they would think, oh, gee, I'm just the best heavy assault in the game. I should be on point as a heavy assault. And the reality is, maybe their self-perspective is a little skewed about what they should be doing, but they're still a very, very good player. It's not like being a heavy assault is a higher skill position. Maybe they are extremely good, but they're actually a better support player. They're actually so good that I want them on this particular role because it's better for the team. You have to be able to accept that if you want to be a good teammate. You don't have to be a good teammate. You can be YOLO solo in this game. No one's stopping you. You can say, stuff your team, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm going to go do what I want if you don't let me do what I want. And that's totally fine. In the first show, we talked about how Planetside is a sandbox game, effectively, and you're entitled to do that. As long as you're having fun with the game, that's what matters. But if you want to play with a team and you want to be a good teammate, if those things are true, sometimes you might have to do something you don't want to do because it's stronger for the team itself. And being able to do that and maybe later on you can make a case for why you should be on this role, or maybe you can practice that role you want to do and get better at it, or maybe you'll find you actually enjoy the role. You found a way to enjoy the role you were assigned. But in any case, arguing about it, or raging about it, or making demands or whatever about it is not going to benefit anybody in the end. It's probably just going to infuriate your leader, and it's probably just going to tick off your teammates. So accept your assigned position. At least try it out. At least give your leader the benefit of the doubt for a little while until you've really determined that it's not something you can do. Thoughts, kid?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too. Like, that you never know. Like you said, you might actually enjoy it, but I think being flexible is really underrated. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good players. I would say, like, if you look at the top infantry players or the top, air guys or whatever it is, that everybody thinks of them as just the top infantry player, right? Nobody thinks of them as this guy or this player that can actually do it all. And there's very few people that, at least in my mind, that can do it all. The jack of all trades. Oh, shit, that's just died. And so, I mean, the more you try roles that are outside of your comfort zone, the more it kind of opens up, things. It's just the more possibilities open up. And it's one of those things too, where like if you get into like a line of really bad habits or you're dying a lot, like I said, it's always refreshing to try something else. Maybe you're a bad pilot, so try flying. And then when you go back to playing in infantry, you might be refreshed. You might have a new perspective. You might have calmed down. The frustration might have ebbed. So you never know. It's always good to try different roles. Because say you already have 2 heavy assaults, and if you had been medic, it would have been like the cornerstone of or the pivotal point of being successful in this push. So I think it's always better to be flexible and just to try new things.
One final piece of advice, because that's pretty much all I have to discuss as far as mentality is concerned, though we'll take questions, is if you are serious about improving,
Can't see the VS here.
the final piece of the puzzle, one of the best things you can do is record your play on video and rewatch it later. Like, not immediately after, give it 6 hours, or give it a day, watch it the next day or something, but just sit back with like a fresh mind and look at what you did as if you were watching somebody else and criticize it, critique it, every move you make, everything you do. And if you do that, you will be amazed what you spot, what you didn't see at the time. Little fixable things. Like one thing I learned, like, I had one where I was watching a video of myself. It was a shooting video because I was wanting to see how I was controlling my recoil, whether I was over adjusting for targets, etc. And I was watching it, and I got a death to a guy who I had no clue where he could have possibly been. I mean, there was no way. It was one of those situations. I was like coming down the stairs on a tower to the garage level, and he shot me in the corner of the stairs from behind after I ran through. And I was like, how could he have possibly got me? He wasn't behind me. He wasn't anywhere. And when I rewatched the video, I had to rewatch it 3 times. And what had happened was the way I had come down the stairs, the model of my gun had blocked him. I had run right past him and not seen him because the model of my gun out had blocked him in my vision.
That's insane.
And all I saw, even rewatching the video 3 times, was the tiniest sliver of him as I ran past. And from that I learned that when I go down these stairs, or any situation like this, I need to be conscious of my gun model and the fact that it blocks vision. It's a silly little thing, but it's something I learned from going back and analyzing video. You'll probably learn other things, but almost everybody can learn something from watching themselves play, so it's very handy. For ops, for team play, as a leader, I used to, with a couple of my guys, not after every practice, but about once a week, we'd watch the video from the ops over again. We'd skip through boring parts or whatever, but he streamed it, so we'd always watch the VOD. And not always, but once a week we'd watch the VOD, and we'd say, hey, what did we do here? Was this good or bad leadership? Was this good or bad play? Should I have made different calls? That kind of thing. It was very, very valuable. So, record yourself, watch yourself, you'll be amazed when you find that you can be doing better. Thoughts, kid?
No, I think it's good. It's kind of like watching tape. I mean, and it's almost like a bonding thing too, because you could shoot the shit with your guys or with your teammates, and it's pretty fun. You can laugh about things or talk about things.
Yeah, it actually built up a lot of bonding between me and my teammate Spanish. We used to do that.
Yeah, and people might say like what's the point? But then if you're asking that, then you could really say what's the point of anything really. And so I mean, you just kind of have to find your own meaning and try. I think a lot of the things too, maybe that we didn't talk about. That's kind of we could probably talk about this for an hour. It is the idea of trying, and what does trying mean? The extra effort that you have to put in, and then you could talk about stats and the averages of people that don't essentially try. But I mean that's way too long of a topic. But essentially, is always try, no matter what. And it makes a huge difference, even just trying something.
So, any questions about anything we've talked about in the last hour and 15 minutes? We'll take final questions here. And even if you think your question is silly, go ahead and ask it. Like, no judgment. Give it a few seconds to roll in.
Well, I mean, this doesn't... I don't know how this... Okay, so they were talking about depth. It's not a question, but they were talking about how deep and complex Planetside 2 is. And that's one of the things that... I'm going to talk about like the competitive events in Planetside 2, that when I've casted, I've always tried to lay that across, is that because of the very nature of the game, being a combined arms game, that it is an incredibly deep game. And yeah, they're right, like sometimes it's hard to understand that, but a lot of that really just comes from playing and learning. You know what I mean? Like, you could only do so much, like you were saying earlier, Pony, playing the game, because you never know, you might be just, doing some really, really bad habit, expressing yourself through bad habits or really not learning. But there's all kinds of avenues, right? There's YouTube, there's other streamers, there's Reddit, there's forums where you could actually learn about the game and really do some research and say, hey, maybe I'm doing this wrong or maybe I'm doing this right. And so when you start to look at the game like that, it actually is, at its roots, it looks really simple. But when you talk about all the things that happen with like, within an infantry fight or an air fight, there's a lot of subtle things that I think kind of get washed out and kind of lost in translation. But when you look at them, it changes the way you look at the game. And it really kind of like allows you to take what was previously challenging and really, really kind of boil it down.
Yeah, there's no shortage of things to do in Planetside and things to get better at. So, looks like there's no questions, so we'll wrap it up there, kid?
Yeah, this is, whatever. That's about the mentality episode for Attack on Auraxis. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. This is, I'm kidRiot, and with me was Pwnyboy. Actually, as I was saying that, there's a question. We'll answer that and then we'll cut off. I know that's kind of awkward, but...
Word.
This is Buff Drink Lots. What are some of the things that you began doing or learned that you think elevated you to another tier of skill? You could answer this because I know you did a lot of work. Your answer would be a lot better than mine.
So, I made use of the resources I had available to me. When I started, I was not the best FPS player in the world, and I ended as not the best FPS player in the world. But Zoid, say what you want about Zoid, a lot of people didn't like him, but regardless, he was one of the best FPS players in North America. He's a smart dude. I spent a year working with him. He is a smart dude, I will say that. And by the end of it, he had told me that as far as he was concerned, I belonged on any competitive team, like in FPS, that I was good enough to have a place in a competitive team in FPS. So I went from being relatively scrubby to good enough to be on any competitive team in FPS. Sorry, daughter.
That's fine.
What I did, like I said, is I made use of my resources. So one of the first things I did when I ended up on his team, which was mostly through circumstance, was I asked him, I was like, hey Zoid, give me some one-on-one time, give me some coaching, tell me how I can improve. I had that resource available to me, not everybody does, but you have other resources available to you. I learned a lot about how to play angles, exactly how to move in an FPS, what player tendencies are, what direction does the average player look, and how should I push a corner to exploit that. Those sorts of things. I learned a lot of that I didn't know before, and it helped a ton. I'm sure there's video resources out there, or you can just ask players who are really good, and I'm sure they can give advice. But if you've got resources available to you, whether it's internet, videos, whether it's Reddit, whether it's, really, really good players that you know or know of, or even if there's a guy who kills you all the time, I'm sure they'd be flattered if you were just like, you know what, you're really good, could you give me some advice? And that's a resource, as long as you don't have too much pride to make use of it, that's a resource you can make use of. And anywhere that you can scrounge out some advice and some learning is a place that you can get better from. Any thoughts, kid?
No, it's good, and I think the PTS. People think of it as just a way. The new patches get pushed out, but I always thought of PTS as like practice grounds, right? It's where you go when you want to do those one-on-ones with minimal outside interference, or you want to do some scrimmages or practice. I would say PTS is almost perfect for that.
Kyler Vin has a question that actually sort of ties into what we've been talking about today, where he says, what should you do when you encounter a rude /mean/jerk player? this ties into mentality. A lot of times, maybe like, oh god, I had a couple players that like were just the worst. It's like every time, either I kill them or they kill me. These guys sent me a towel. There was like maybe 4 or 5 of them, and because I played a lot, you run into these people again and again. And it can really send you on tilt, especially if you know you're better than them. You beat them all the time, and then they kill you once, and they send you a tell, and you've already had a bad session, and you know you made a mistake. Like, that's the kind of thing that can send you on tilt very easily, where you're just like enraged. Okay, the first thing, my strategy to dealing with it, Kyler, is to treat them like a human being. I just literally say, hey, that's really mean. Could you like not be mean to me? Like, I'm having a bad day. And I had a couple people who were really mean to me, and because I was so human to them, actually started talking with me. We talked about stuff.
They killed me.
And I actually became friends with me, that sort of thing. That happened 2 times that I remember. The rest of the time people are like, oh, sorry, I didn't know, or whatever. You'd be surprised, there are other human beings out there. They're not all just, like, mindless, brainless trolls. Like, they're doing the same thing as you out there. Sometimes they are trolls, and there's nothing you can do about them but ignore them. If you try to engage them in conversation, you will not win against a troll. Their whole point is to get a reaction out of you. And if you're even giving them a reaction, even if you're winning the quote-unquote internet debate with them about whether or not you're using hacks or whatever, you're not winning. You're just going down to their level. Just ignore it. So treat them like human beings, be congenial and polite, and if that doesn't work, ignore them. That's all I can say. Don't let it set you on tilt. And if it does send you on tilt, then take a break.
No, I agree with that. That you could always just say, 1v1 me, bro. That always works.
When would I use the report player feature? I must have used the report player feature 200 or 300 times over my course of playing Planetside, and I'm pretty sure it never once resulted in anything, so I just wouldn't bother. Unless you're 100% certain that the guy's hacking. Like, I don't mean like, oh, that was fishy. I mean like literally the guy's stuck inside of a mountain headshotting everyone instantly as they spawn off a Sunder kind of hacking. Then you report him and he'll be, enough people will do that he'll be banned by the next day or something like that. But that's about the only time I would do it.
I think we'll answer one last question, and then we'll shut it out. But it's an invalid face. Says, how do you define a good player? And I think this is a really good question.
You want to take a first crack at that, kid?
Yeah. Okay, so, obviously everything happens within a context, right? If you give too general of a statement, it kind of doesn't work. But for me, I would say within my context of like a teammate, right? As an outfit mate, as a person that I play with on a daily basis, I would say somebody that looks at the game kind of in the way that we've been talking about. They understand that, no matter how bad it gets, no matter what, you get a second crack at it. 2, that they're open, and they communicate well, and that the attitude in general is good. Because even like I said, no matter how good you are, we're human, right? We're emotional beings. It's still a pretty good chance we're going to rage at things that we don't think is fair. But for the most part, it's somebody that's balanced emotionally, and that looks at the game as similar to what I like, and that's that I always kind of want to improve. I want to get better. I want my outfit to get better, and so they do what's necessary for that. And they're willing to sometimes, like Pony said, play a certain role, even if they're not happy with it. So it's essentially a person with an open mind that communicates well and has a generally, balanced emotional state. So that's what I would say is a good player. Because when you talk about stats, when you talk about like a high kill death ratio, a high accuracy, these things that matter to a lot of players, those things really come with time. And if you're too focused and intent on that, you kind of lose sight of, like they say, right? The adventure sometimes is its own reward. And so somebody to me that kind of understands that, and that knows that things will come with time, but practices to it, isn't complacent or lazy. That's what I think is a good player.
So for me, I think the question is really, really, really vague. Not necessarily a bad question, but a very vague question.
Right.
There are lots of ways that somebody can be good at something or another thing. So if you say what defines a good player, well, there's what is a good teammate, and there's what is a good infantry player, and there's what is a good, air guy, and there's what is a good student. That's another one. Like, What is a player who maybe he's not most mechanically skilled right now, but shows a ton of potential? And all of these things are different things, and you just got to judge each player on the individual characteristics within the confines of what you're judging them on, and that's it. So, in my opinion, the best player is someone who's an amazing teammate, who has amazing mechanics, who, he's a polite, teammate. He has good leadership qualities, and he understands that he has a good strategic mind, and he makes good suggestions, or if he's a leader, makes good calls, and all of these things. And there are very, very few people that meet all of these criteria. They're good at everything. It's such a rare human quality to be so amazing at everything you do. Even in Nuck, I think Nuck, I'm biased, yes, but I think Nuck was the best outfit in the game, at least up until the point we played. I don't know if that's still true. There might be outfits that have gotten better than we ever did, but I'm not sure. Even in Nuck, there was only maybe 4 or 5 people that fit that definition, in my opinion. And it's just unreasonable to expect everyone to be good at everything. It's valuable when you have them, but it is unreasonable to expect it of everyone.
Yeah. It's not even one of those things. It's not an excuse or a factor. It's just us, right? I mean, there's a reason there's only one Michael Jordan. There's a reason there's only like one, Lionel Messi. But it doesn't mean that you enjoy the game any less or any less effective or any less, important. So it's just one of those things, that's just the way life is. I mean, essentially, there's always somebody that's going to be better, no matter how good you get, right? And it might not even be better. It might have been just better in that situation, in that scenario. So, I mean, that's the beauty, I think, of Planetside 2, is that it is a bit chaotic, and, you never know what's going to be around the corner. You might think it's one guy, but you run into, like, a max, and you die instantly. And, while that can be frustrating, I think it's one of those things that I look forward to, because there's an element of, like, chaos to the game that I really kind of appreciate, that you don't get in maybe another type of game where it's more instanced, it's more kind of consistent. Anyway, that's it. Do you have anything else to add, Pwny, before we close shop?
No, just thanks, guys, for watching. Supporting streams like this supports Planetside in general, and that's super cool that you guys tune in and listen to a couple of dudes like us discuss such things. I hope you learned something, I hope it was valuable, and I hope you'll tune in next week.
Yeah, and speaking of supporting streams, it looks like at 6 o'clock today, Pacific, it's going to be Bear Force 9 with Zoran. I recommend you guys tune in. I know last week he had the interview with David Carey, the producer. It was really enjoyable. His content's it's pretty fun to watch. So like I said, just support the stream and just always think about what you're doing, or even if you're not thinking about what you're doing when you're doing it, think about it afterwards. It can make a huge difference. So anyway, that's it for Pwny and me. Thanks for tuning in to this week's show of Attacking Auraxis. Adios.
Have a great week, guys.